Since 2015, the All Progressives Congress has dominated the political scene, but dominance doesn't always mean delivery. Governance under APC has seen both reform pledges and rising concerns. Last week, former Minister of Youth and Sports Dalung raised eyebrows, warning that Nigeria may be edging dangerously close to a life presidency scenario under President Bola Tinubu.
A serious allegation, especially in a democracy built on term limits. Dalung accuses the administration of tightening its grip on power while democratic institutions lose steam. Now, is this a cautionary tale or political exaggeration? And where does the APC truly stand on transparency, rule of law, and institutional dependency? Discussing, or joining us to discuss this further, is former Minister of Youth and Sports, as well as human rights activist, Mr. Solomon Dalung. Good to have you join us, and good morning to you, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Let's just get started. And I think the question in everyone's mind is Nigeria's democracy evolving like the way the president has alluded to, especially during his Democracy Day speech, or is it slowly being eroded under the APC rule?
Well, Nigerian democracy is gradually drifting into absolute tyranny with the compromise of the democratic institutions like the National Assembly, which is expected constitutionally to play a supervisory role on the other arms of the government, completely, as we can see in the past 2 years, National Assembly had only presented itself as an extension of the executive arm, because almost everything that goes there is not subjected to the normal scrutiny, even where there are laid down regulations by law as to the procedure to be adapted. The National Assembly had always circumvented such processes and impose even unlawful institutions on our democracy. Then when you take a look at even how intolerant the conduct of the National Assembly leadership is as to the dissenting voices in the National Assembly, any voice that seems to oppose the leadership is suspended outrightly, even when suspension is unknown to the laws of the National Assembly, it is imposed. And then when you look at how the judiciary has been unable to call both the executive and legislative arm to order, even when they do, these orders are not to comply with. And you then look at how the Chapter 2 of the Constitution is completely abandoned by the executive arm or the government itself. So the summary of all this put together with the current wave of sole candidature, which the last time we heard of it was under military rule. So when we have it now surfacing under our presumed democracy, or diarchy rather, because currently now we have diarchy. We don't have democracy, but we have diarchy because we have a military ruler in some part of the country, while we have some elected leaders operating elsewhere. So that is diarchy, and it's not democracy. And even the attainment of this diarchy is by flagrant disregard to our constitution. So these sum up together raises a very serious apprehension that the tendency left for us is not only sole candidature, but we will have a life president very soon.
Anyway, you've made your summation. You've talked about the judiciary, you've talked about the legislative arm, and so on. But what do you make of the current National Assembly, the 10th National Assembly, in line with what we see with our democracy? What do you make of it?
The current 10th National Assembly is the architect of this preposition I am advancing, because the 10th National Assembly in the history of this, our democratic experiment from 1999, and even with the Second Republic and the First Republic, presented itself as one of the unique assembly history will ever remember for, abandoning the people and pursuing personal interests and the interests of the executive. Reducing the entire institution, which is the institution of democracy, to not even understand now, but they are choristers of the executive, because they've elevated themselves beyond a rubber stamp to choristers. Because if it's a rubber stamp, there must be some something for them to endorse. But in this case, this National Assembly, upon citing President Bola Tinubu stepping into the hollow chambers, they will start singing as if, like I always say, children citing their grandfather bringing biscuits for them. It's unheard of, and it is undemocratic. It's not found in any democratic culture. And the songs they sing are not even songs that promote national cohesion or the unity of the country or patriotism or nationalism. They are songs that are sung to advance the ego of the president. So we've never had this type of National Assembly. Throughout my life in this country, since I became an adult, and my participation in politics and activism, I've never seen a National Assembly like the one we have now. And that is where the masses are supposed to be represented, because the National Assembly is a conglomeration of the voices of the Nigerian people. You look at how low the conduct of proceedings in the National Assembly. There was a time the Senate President, with impunity, was announcing sending monies to the accounts of the members. And then suddenly he realized the mic was on, and he said, he was going to send email. You can imagine how the world is looking at us, that is the National Assembly of the giant, the supposed giant of Africa. So the National Assembly, to me, has performed very, very low and abysmally low.
Now, Mr. Dalung, there's one thing you said earlier, and I just wanted you to clarify on that before I move on to my next question, and that was about the term that you used to define this administration, or rather the governance that we have in present-day Nigeria. You said it was theatric, and that's because in some parts of the country we have elected leaders or governors, and in some other parts of the country we have military rule. What do you mean by that? And what parts of the country are you referring to that has military rule?
A diarchy is a form of government where you have the civilians and uniformed men jointly providing leadership. And currently in Nigeria, we have a sole administrator illegally imposed on the River State by the National Assembly and the President. I refer to it as illegally because the provisions of the Constitution was flagrantly abused and disregarded. The President was supposed by Section 305 to have imposed a state of emergency, and the conditions were also enumerated under that section. Now, the President went ahead to have declared a state of emergency. The law requires him to gazette it in a federal gazette and send the gazette to the National Assembly within 2 days of 48 hours for confirmation. The gazette has not been sent to the National Assembly. He appointed a sole administrator, proceeded to sway the sole administrator even before the state of emergency was to be confirmed by the National Assembly. And when we went to the National Assembly, the requirement of 2/3 of the members of the National Assembly approving the state of emergency was jettisoned, because all that we saw there were few members of the National
seem to have lost
a very ignoble process was used, a voice vote to approve it. So, by every standard, the Constitution was a breach,
right,
and you have an imposition. So that is why I refer to it as diarchy,
right,
because we have a retired military man there with an incongruous nomenclature called sole administrator.
Now, Mr. Dalung, with that being established, let's now circle back to the presidency. Your comments, you raised your alarm and said that Nigeria is at a risk of, quote, life presidency by President Tinubu, right? Especially with the kind of control he has on the legislature, which is the National Assembly. And you have just pointed out over and over again just how, negligent, or should I say complicit, they have been in the past 2 years. Is this fear-mongering, or do you have more substantial claims or more substantial evidence to prove your point, or this notion that you're advancing about a life presidency by the president?
You see, history is meant to remind people of what has happened, and then to assist in predicting what the future will look like. When we were in this country, when Sani Abacha started this game of adoption, and we had 5 political parties, each holding infamous rallies and adopting him. And finally, we had him as a sole candidate before he suddenly passed on. Now, that is a lesson for us to learn, that there was somebody who wanted to back every opinion and everybody living as a citizen of Nigeria, whether he or she likes to impose himself as a sole candidate in a sole election where he will be the sole winner and he will and then emerge as a maximum ruler. So if in 2025, about 26 or 27 years ago, and suddenly we now have, under supposed democracy or diarchy, like I referred to it, and then we have defections first introduced into the political culture, where governors elected on the platform of oppositions are defecting into the ruling party, and then when that has not been concluded, because we don't know when that will finish, we suddenly have now the sole endorsement of the president as a sole candidate of his party. And then if you take this and align it with what I have enumerated of the behavior of the National Assembly, of course my fear is not misplaced, because this has happened before in one of the African countries. In Uganda, under the First Republic of Uganda, a prime minister having a firm control of the parliament decided to amend the constitution and declare himself president. And even within the constitution, his name was boldly printed as a president, thereby making him constitutionally the only president that will rule that country without a tenure. And that suddenly led to the end of that republic. So my fear is not just a phobia. It is anchored on historical facts as it is obtainable in what I have referred to within Nigeria and elsewhere.
All right, sir. Finally, I'd like to ask, what's your take on the Benway State massacre? I'm sure you've been following the stories as well. What do you make of the current situation? And do you think, I recall during your time as Minister of Sports, insecurity was also a big problem, especially to the then administration, and there were calls for resignation, slowness in ensuring that they handle the situation of things during that time. What do you make out of the current situation of things in Benway State and the response so far so good from the current administration?
I'm completely devastated with the events in Benway. My heart is so heavy that fellow citizens like me, could face such very traumatic dates where they are just maimed, killed in their ancestral homes. Well, it is true that this has been on in Benway. Even when I was in office, I had even the opportunity to prevail on the visit to Benway, and I went to Benway by a chopper to have a good view of what was happening there. I went over the state and came back and discussed extensively with the then governor and offered my own opinion as to how he should deal with the issue. I also advised the president on my own opinion as to the method to be deployed. Because this happened when the president gave a marching order to the IG, and then the IG ended up in Nasarawa, not even relocating to Benway, just for the president to discover that. So the Benway situation is very, very unfortunate. But what is happening in Benway, let me be very, very honest, is the politicization of insecurity. Yes, there are terrorists from with non-indigenous background in Benway wreaking the havoc on the people. But the inability of the state to deal with it, first is lack of a political will, and then the politicization of the situation. Because I cannot be convinced why the secretary to the government of the federation is from Benway. With all these things that have been happening in Benway, we have not had him issue statements, make visits to his home state even before these ceremonial visits that will yield no result from either the service chiefs or the president. All these are just political visits. They don't need to visit Benway before they will deal with this situation. Obasanjo did not go to Yobe when he gave a marching order to the military to flush out Nigerian Taliban in Yobe. President Musa Yar'Adua, may his soul rest in perfect peace, did not go to Maiduguri. He was just on his way to Japan by his aircraft when he gave the marching order that when I return from Japan, I don't want to hear this. So once there is a political will, this ceremony of political celebration in the name of enough is enough, we are on top of the situation, we are not going to take this. When will it not be enough? So the visit of the president is just mere a political visit. It has no value to add. You will still have this criminal emboldened. And I don't pray, but that is what will actually happen. So they need to act. We don't want to hear statement. The military does not make noise. The military is seen in action. That's how the military behaves. But we have a military always by the television, issuing statement, and then the president condemning. So I don't think that the Benway situation is given the decision. And I want to challenge the Benway political actors that we will hold them responsible, because it does appear that the disagreement among them is also fueling what is happening in the state.
All right. So I must say thank you for taking out the time to join us today and just to raise the alarm on our institutions and how, you know, whether it's a green or red chamber, they are the ones who are supposed to check the presidency and to be, you know, non-complicit, but better yet stand for the people as they are the representative of the grassroots of Nigeria. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. The former Minister of Youth and Sports as well as human rights activist Solomon Dalung. Once again, thank you.
Thank you very much.